Typical of status quo. Lazy and to the bone, no doubt about it.
Najee Harris sucks. No, he doesn't, but felt like a title that might get you all in here, I guess. Try out some background noise, let me know what you think. I am going to talk about Najee Harris and Travis Etienne. I know everyone's knocking out like player-by-player content, mostly for the extra clicks, but I just... Look at me, I'm tired. I'm just waiting for my course material to upload, and I thought while I did that, I'd make a video. So I want to talk to you about the running back 1 and 2 in this year's class, and why they clearly stand out as really the only two good prospects from this year's running back class. There are a few I'm really interested in, but as far as crossing the good threshold, there's two that just stand. Those two, Najee Harris and Travis Etienne, just stand out very clearly above the rest. But compared to past classes and past years, honestly, they're just good. There's no one crossing the wow threshold for me, which, you know, I wonder if a lot of people are going to be adjusting their love of Etienne and Najee Harris for that. Like, kind of experience bias, you know, when you're just in this little scenario, these two look so much more impressive than everyone else. So they're the greatest until you add anyone else in. Like, neither one of them, both would have struggled to kick Swift out of like the 4th, 5th spot in last year's class. And I had some problems with Swift's profile, but there are a lot more interesting aspects to his profile that just convinced me that what people were saying about him was right. We probably have to do a video on Swift and why he comes out low in my model last year pre-draft wise. No, I still have some questions about him. But he's the one who easily rises in dynasty value basically every time he touches the ball. But anyway, we're talking about Travis Etienne and Najee Harris. So how do I have him ranked? 1. You don't owe me. I don't have to have a 1 and a 2. I didn't last year. After the draft, at least, I had Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I was pretty happy with either. So, like, I can do what I want. Push comes to shove, I probably would say Harris. But here's the thing. I just watched, it was like the other day or something like that. Ray GQ, the man himself from the Dynasty Devi podcast, got a YouTube channel. Should really check it out. He's much more entertaining to watch, but a little less nerdy. So, you know, if you like some nerd in your diet, then I guess I'm it. And he basically proclaimed that there was no conversation, anyone saying that it wasn't Harris at 1, very clearly, like, that was silly, basically. There was no conversation to be had. We weren't allowed to have the conversation because it doesn't exist. Which makes me want to have the conversation, Ray. So, you know, I'm just saying, little man, like, anyone who doesn't know Ray's a former football player and literally, like, little man. I'm just saying, I think I got some inches on him, and I think I can call him small. Just saying, Ray. Just saying. Sorry, in my head, there's nothing funnier than, like, a skinny little nerd like myself calling an ex-football player small. Like, in my head, that's just... He'll probably hate me for the rest of my life now, but there you go. But yeah, Ray said there wasn't a conversation, which makes me want to have a conversation, but yeah... Harris, if I had to choose between the two, but that's mostly because I have consumed some outside content at this point. I'm beyond my own opinions. I've got my rank set pretty much pre-draft. I'm pretty comfortable. I keep adding on an extra note or two, but my ranks are pretty set pre-draft right now. And yeah, I think I'd be fine with saying Harris is the 1 and Etienne is the 2nd, because I've consumed some content. I listened to J. Mike Check and Zach Reed talk about both of them on the Dynasty Dummies podcast, and yeah, they convinced me there's some aspects to Etienne's game that might not translate as well as Harris does, because they have access to different information than I do. I'm not using my eyes to test these guys because Again, that's just not my process. I don't think I add value that way or have a perspective that's really worth paying attention to. I just enjoy football. I don't have, the sight for whether their footwork's going to translate or anything like that. But on a production basis, and that's what I want to get to, they're the same. They're the same. Harris has got an edge in terms of where he's coming from. The NFL loves his conference and loves to draft players from his conference. He has a slight edge in that regard. He's also coming from Alabama, isn't it? Which the NFL just loves across the board at every position. Yep, Alabama. So he has that, which I guess you could use in an edge, but honestly, we're going to have that edge. If it exists, then it's going to exist in their draft capital, and we'll know that before we have to draft anyway. But in terms of what they did in the field, adjusting for where they paid, not how much the NFL likes where they played, they're the same. They're almost identical. Etienne gets a slight edge in my pre-draft model, which is trash. The dirty little secret here of my pre-draft model is actually the best score in 2021 now, is Spencer Brown. I'm just not talking about that yet. Like, it's a sensitive subject. Don't bother me over it. No, there are reasons, and there's also a reason I don't use a model to rank, because I'm not a genius analytic person. I'm just this guy. Does this guy look like he's got genius stapled to his... No. So I try to read as much as I can. I'm not going to create a model that solves it all for us. It's just a benchmark of how really they compare to past players. And again, 8s are good in the pre-draft model. 3 of the players last year had a 10 or over. Saquon Barkley's in the 12 range. 8's good. It's good. I think part of the reason is, and they're both scoring 8 points something, they're both in the 8 range. Part of the reason is they've played 4 years. If I can just pull up my notes here, that's probably going to work better for us. Where are my notes? My ranking notes. I know I have them. Here they are. So a problem fighting with the class in general actually is that running backs are well above the number of games played for players who have top 12 seasons from past classes. The average running backs who have a top 12 season in the NFL touch the ball around 583 times in college before elevating to the NFL level. Both of these players, Etienne and Harris, have over 700 touches. Now again, the fallacy of the average tells us that doesn't mean you have to have around that number. That's preposterous and crappy analysis. For example, a great example of crappy analysis is, how do you have Travis Etienne below Najee Harris? He has 6,000 yards and Harris only has 4,500. We were beyond that, somewhere around the point where we learned to count. As far as I know, no one who seriously looks at analytics would make that kind of assessment. Like, just being over 583 touches doesn't mean you're bad. I mean, Le'Veon Bell had around 700 touches in college, and he's pretty much the most prolific running back since LaDainian Tomlinson. So, yeah, it doesn't matter, but it's noticeable. And I think that's part of the reason they're both getting 8s in this model, and there's no real standout between either of them. Because the running back model, as I've learnt, and I think the model is relying on it too, it kind of wants to be punched in the mouth. To be honest with you, it wants the biggest, heaviest punch you got. Give me the best you've got. And that's how it ranks. It looks at the average in terms of points per game, but the rest of the time it's best season, it's last season. It's searching for a player who just full-on punches it in the mouth and it goes, ooh, yeah, have a 10 or above, my friend. And neither of them really did that. Both of them did well. Neither of them was so productive in good situations. It didn't punch the model in the mouth. It was just like, yeah, this guy beat me up, but I've been hit harder, is basically what it's telling you. And I think part of it is the fact that the production spans over such a large touch range that our efficiency numbers and their average points per game is just kind of muting the results. So Etienne has a slightly higher pre-draft score, but Harris, yeah, especially when I take into context of how they're actually producing their points, it does seem like Harris is the overall winner. Now, especially when you give him that slight conference bias for the NFL. Now, Etienne has a larger points yards per touch, which is just a simple counting stat I like to look at. You can probably see it right here. If I skip along a little bit in the counting stats section, he has 7.7 yards per touch, and Harris has 6.5. Both of those are above the average for top 12 running backs. Top 12 running backs average about 6.6 point something, 6.1-ish. So both of them are well above that. But again, yards per touch isn't a great metric. Now, yards per game is a very descriptive stat in terms of how they did overall, and it's one I do like to roll into my evaluation or understanding of how they actually produced. And again, Etienne slightly wins. He gets 103 yards per game, whereas Najee Harris gets 94, but this is where we build the conference in, and in Etienne's conference, the average yards per game tends to be a little higher than the conference Harris was playing in, and both actually get to the average for top 12 running backs from their conferences. Neither of them demolish it, and I wish I still had that calculation pulled up. If I remember right, average running backs with top 12 seasons coming from Harris's conference, from Etienne's conference, average about 110 yards per game, and Najee Harris's conference average about 93 yards per game. Looking at past players that came from the same conference as them over the last 5 years who have top 12 seasons. And again, Najee Harris' average yards per game is, oh, I do have it here. Yeah, the average, it's this column right here. Can you see that? Yeah, you can. This one, the one that says average, yeah. Etienne says his conference average is 103 for players with top 12 seasons. His was 110 yards per game. Harris's conference average is 94, and he averaged 89 yards per game. Now, again, fallacy of the average, the fact that Najee Harris is slightly below it doesn't hurt it, but again, that's probably another reason or another symptom. This is a symptom of the same thing that fed the model and gave Etienne the slight advantage. Neither of them destroyed the conference average. Neither of them on a per game basis, just in terms of total yards, were like, whoa, look at that guy. That's amazing. They were just kind of, yeah, that's what good players do in that conference, which is good. We want good players, but again, it didn't punch it in the mouth. And stuff like this, per yards per game, or even yards per attempt, or yards per team, pass attempt, or however I look at it, both of them do, yeah, pretty much what good players do from that conference. Neat. That's good. I like them. They have the highest scores in my pre-draft model. None of them punched it in the face. They all just kind of beat it up. None of them knocked it out. I don't know, whatever sounds more masculine to you, because I guess we want masculine. Like, I'm trying to make it sound good. See, the simple fact is, they were both good, and did mostly what players who go on to go good in those situations did. None of them exceeded that. And again, it's not exponential. Again, like having 6,000 yards isn't better than having 4,000 yards. It's about the way you produced it. But it is nice to see a player just be a completely different kind of animal, and there really is no player in this class that does that. The closest I have is actually Kenny Gainwell. I was recently working this adjusted yards per team attempt gives extra weighting to receiving yards. So it's actually a weighted stat, but it's Anthony Amico put me onto it, and he calls it adjusted. It's actually weighted, and then I adjusted it by conference. That sounded boring. Either way, once you take into the conference and give extra points to the receiving yards, essentially, the only player that ranks significantly high in their best season, which is also their only season, is Kenny Gainwell. Etienne and Harris, again, are good. They look like good players. Kenny Gainwell's in like the top 10 overall since 2000, once you adjust adjusted yards or weighted yards per team attempt by their conference. So, and he's got his own issues. I'll do his own video on him, or maybe some other players as well, but he only played one season, which is fine at running back. But again, I'm going to save it for his video. Etienne and Harris, again, it's just kind of a thumbs up. It's really boring in that sense. Like, I don't have a Nick Chubb. I don't have a Saquon Barkley. I really don't have anything to add metrics-wise between either of these two players. They were both like, yeah, pretty good. Pretty good, and they're probably going to draft capital, and they'll be good at their roles. Etienne had a stronger inclination towards the receiving game. I think 11% of his touches came from the receiving game, and about 9% of Harris's touches came from the receiving game. The average for running backs who have a top 12 season is about 9%. So yeah, that's pretty good. It's just like that. Across the board. Thumbs up. Yeah, nice. Good job. Nothing that lights your hair on fire. At least, obviously, if you're going to go watch them play, you're going to see amazing athletes doing amazing things on a football field and be stunned, especially because they're both playing in good conferences. So they're going to be in these massive stadiums, I assume, with great crowds and people cheering, and there's going to be good plays and bad plays. It's not being grainy footage from some Cursor West conference. It's going to be amazing to watch. And they are very good players playing on very good teams. And I'm sure it's going to knock your socks off, because every player I watch pretty much knocks my socks off because they all look fantastic to me. But when you compare them to past players, it's just a good job, dude. You did that thing right on the average. Neat. That's it. That's all of it. You adjusted weighted yards per team pass attempt, yards per team pass attempt, yards per attempt above conference level, production score, rushing attempt share. I even created, hoping to find an edge. I'd never done this before, and I just added it to the database to try and, say something or understand their production a little better. I worked out the percentage of their positional touches by age, and then looked at their best, worst, less than average, like I did everything else. So I do know that Najee Harris really became the dominant force over the last 2 years. That's partly why his production probably seems a little muted. And again, I can adjust for that. He's probably a lot more impressive than just a good job. He was an amazingly large part of their offense over the last 2 years. He had 64% of the team's positional touches at age, 21? Last year at age 22, so he's coming in a little older. We've always kind of noted that. He had 70% of the team's touches. That is a monster workload at his position. So yeah, that's a bit more than a thumbs up. But that's just overall volume, and in a COVID year, we kind of have to put a little asterisk on that as well. And again, Etienne did pretty well. He was a larger, more dominant force for his offense at age 19, so a little younger. But again, with running back, it doesn't really matter so much. I mean, you can be Miles Sanders behind other good backs, and it can take a slower path. But yeah, he did start out a little earlier. His production spread over 3 years, or really all 4 years. He had a decent role on that team, 30% to 49% to 62%. And again, those last 2 years kind of knocked it out of the park with over 60% opportunities. Now, if we look at for the average for top 12 backs, it's around about 65%. And what I actually looked at was, again, looking at the conference average. If I can frickin' find it in this massive boring stuff. Boring to you, fascinating to me, obviously. Where was it? Yeah, here it is, opportunity score. So the average for Travis Etienne's conference, if they go on to be good in the NFL, was around 53%. That was their average over their entire course career. And Etienne's average is around 51%. That's a thumbs up. The average for Najee Harris in his conference is around 55%. Now, his average is particularly low, again, which is probably why the model's giving a symptom of why the model's giving Etienne the slight bump, because his average is 44% of team opportunity touches for that position, and the average for his conference is 55%. But again, he only got the opportunity, a monster opportunity, in these last 2 years, and in the last year he had 70%, as I noted, which is well above the average. It's just when you look at his overall career, it's been a bit of a slow burn, and then a really big, a pretty good punch at the end, over the last 2 years. So neat. But when you look at his overall career and compare it to past prospects, good job, bud. Like, yeah, yep, that's about what it looks like, and I hate to keep coming back to that point, because that's where I am. So, running back in general, and it's the same with points per game, by the way. Their average, Travis Etienne has 21 points per game over the average of his career. The average from his conference, which is pretty much the place where they stand out the most, for running back ones, is 16 points per game. So, Etienne was very much more productive than your average running back one for their team in that conference. And it's the same with Najee Harris. Najee Harris, average points per game is around 16.7. And the average running back one from that conference is around 16.8. But we know he only got the real role in those last 2 years, and if you look at his best season, he had 31 points per game, which is a smack in the mouth. It's just that it's also spread out over it. So essentially what I'm going back to here is, Production struggles harder at running back, although models and statistics actually have a lot higher correlation to actual points in the NFL because draft capital gives us that extra boost because we know, at least with the NFL, production's about opportunity. Draft capital tells us so much more about which running backs are going to get opportunity. I can say if you look at the best season, Najee Harris clearly stands out, as he does with 31 points per game compared to the 16 points per game conference average for running back ones. In his best season, he clearly stands out even above Etienne, which is a little bit more of a slower burn. But the model gives him slightly more of an edge because Etienne's overall career always crept over the average rather than ever being under it. Again, he had a pretty significant role even in his first year. And that's what they look like in terms of production. From there, especially with running back, we need to know how they produced. I'm going to talk to Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies myself on the Monday grind on Tuesday tomorrow. I'm hoping to hear more about him, but already I know from his conversation with Janiak some of his traits that he has some concerns with, but still likes him very well, which again kind of reinforces that Najee Harris has more got a skill set and produces in a manner that's more conducive to the kind of things we seek for in the NFL. But production-wise, they're pretty much inseparable. I mean, my favorite of this was when you look at yards per team attempt above conference. Like the average for running backs who go on to have a top 12 season is around 1.04. Is actually written right at the top here if you're interested, because I do the calculation just for a quick reference in my version of it, which you can do in yours as well, but I get that you probably won't. But in their best seasons, that's one of the ones that has the highest correlation. Because again, the model wants to be punched in the mouth. So yards per team attempt, not pass attempt, just all attempts, above conference average. The average for running backs who go on to have a top 12 season is around 1 point something, just slightly over 1, over the conference average in their best season. Etienne and Harris both have 1.2 yards per team attempt above average in their best seasons. Now, the best seasons happened in different years, on different teams, in different conferences with different conference average, and they both have 1.2, exactly the same score, and it's exactly the same margin above average when you compare it to top 12 players. Production-wise, they're pretty much identical. You can give Harris the edge with their conference. You can give him the edge with his best being a slightly higher production year with that 31 points per game, which is frankly highly impressive. You can give Etienne a slight boost since he seems to be more of a receiver, been used more in the receiving game, but mostly that's an edge because if teams draft a player, it's mostly to use them for the skill set they've seen, and Harris was used enough in the receiving game that he's in the category where he could get decent PPR work, and so we don't really have to worry about him having to be Derrick Henry, and he's very much probably not Derrick Henry, but there you go. And that's them. Those are the two. Like, I would love to argue with Ray that there is no conversation, but there really isn't. Both of these guys are good, and everyone else has slight flaws or came from lower conferences or only played one season, and that's it. That's a running back class this year. I wonder how much we're going to over-exaggerate how much we like these players, because to be fair, both of them look good. I think their model scores are muted, probably because of COVID and 2020 a little bit, and probably because they were later bloomers. I would like to know, and I want to dig into more, who was it they were being held behind, because that's slightly interesting, but still, again, that's mostly a team decision. It's not like you can push your way onto a team if the coaches just don't. They don't. And again, Etienne kind of got on the field to a significantly high role, 30% of the positional touches in his first year, so he probably would. He doesn't even have that potential black mark against him. So yeah, there's really no conversation to be had. But from a production standpoint, adjusting by whatever you want to adjust the adjustment of the adjustment, doesn't matter. Both look about as productive compared to good players, compared to conference players, whatever, as each other. And they both did that in distinctly different ways, that they have a slightly odd receiving role. That's it. That's all I can say about them. They both very clearly stand out above everyone else in the class in terms of they're taking a much more typical path to being fantasy relevant. In the NFL's draft capital notwithstanding, and that's it. So yeah, I guess the only way I can argue with Ray is to say that Travis Etienne and Najee Harris are about the same, and Etienne had a larger role earlier. But even saying that, I want to interrupt myself and disagree with it. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Etienne had a larger role earlier. This doesn't matter at running back. So yeah, that's your running back 1 and your running back 1. You can order them any way you want. I would lean Harris, much to my chagrin, because I'd like to argue with Ray. And those are the players. Alright, that was the video. Hope you enjoyed it. All this thing is pinned to my Twitter timeline. It's pinned to my Patreon timeline. It's free. It's just so you can go look and argue with people and maybe find something I don't, because God knows I'm not going to find the secret. But I can put the hard work in to grind it out in a format that hopefully you can understand and go look for me. Figure it out, guys, because I'm not gonna. Yeah, appreciate it. If you watched the video, if you didn't, why am I talking to you? I'm out. Yeah, Etienne Harris, 1 and 1. Those are my ranks. Those are my serious ranks. Good luck. Bye. Thanks.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind?